How many people were buying a jumper every single year, only wearing it once, and they're not doing anything with it afterwards?
New research estimates 12 million Christmas jumpers will be brought this year. The environmental charity Hubbub looked at 108 jumpers for sale across 11 major retailers and found that 95% were made wholly or partly of plastic materials.
Just this one? Oh, I love it.
Brilliant.
Beyond Retro is thought to be Europe's largest vintage retailer. They believe they found a sustainable solution to the Christmas jumper.
What's different about the Christmas jumpers here is that many of them are found in the landfill. They're restyled in a factory in India before being brought here to London and sold from £15. Is it really possible to actually have an ethical Christmas jumper?
Well, it is quite possible, yes. We've been selling these jumpers for years now, and we do encourage people to save their jumpers, or we give them nice ideas how they can do it themselves in the future. We also encourage them to not use paper and instead buy a silk scarf to wrap their presents in. So we are really just trying our best.
With plenty of big retailers keen for their slice of the Christmas profit, keeping an eye on sustainability can be tough. But fast fashion comes at a price, and it's what happens after Christmas that matters most. Ali Fortescue, Sky News.
It's the ones with the bells that we have you got one?
No, I'm glad to say I haven't, although someone in my family might have one.
Okay, well, joining us now in the studio is the environmentalist and the adventurer, Lizzie Carr. A very warm welcome to you. What do you make of all of this? Like, why has Christmas jumper become such a thing?
I think it's so important to actually raise this issue and talk about fast fashion more generally. It's one of the world's biggest polluters out there. When you look at the transportation, the production, the labour involved in producing the amount of clothes we consume, not just our Christmas jumpers, it's staggering. The impact, the environmental impact, is a huge price tag attached to that.
Yeah, and I mean, because they're very cheap as well, aren't they? So people tend to buy them and then just... where do they end up?
And who's paying the price of that? Someone somewhere is paying the price of that, and often it's not the end consumer. I think 1 in 6 people are employed in the fashion industry globally, and most of them are women in factories earning less than £3 a day. So it's quite worrying.
Clearly a really important issue. Do you think there is a danger with raising consciousness about all of these issues, that people become a bit fatigued about the issue and they start to feel guilty about every element of their lives? They're being criticised for driving, they're being criticised for wearing a Christmas jumper, which is a harmless enough thing. How big a challenge is that in changing people's minds?
I think you've raised a really important point there. I think people you get like eco-guilt, don't you? Like you feel like you're not doing enough, and then every day there's something else coming out where you could be doing more, and you feel terrible for it. But I think the point is it's just about making small positive changes. So in the case of the Christmas jumper, try and avoid the temptation of buying something brand new. Can you swap it with friends? Maybe your mum's got something in her wardrobe from the 80s that you can bring back out.
This offends you from start to finish. Luckily not guilty of this one, are you?
Christmas jumper. We introduced you there, Lizzie, and we said you're an adventurer and an environmentalist. I think that's not a combination that's that common. Like, what do you do? How did you get to be that?
So my background is paddleboarding. I started paddleboarding about 4 or 5 years ago after an illness, and it was because of that I started to see how bad the problem was with plastic pollution in our waterways. So I did lots of long distance endurance challenges to highlight the issue of plastic pollution, and then in 2017 I paddleboarded across the English Channel, and I actually did microplastic sampling then. And what was really interesting
from your board, you were just picking up. Just tell us what you were doing.
Paddled the length of England first, and a year later I did the English Channel from England to France, obviously 24 miles. It took about 7 hours to complete, but I was microplastic sampling on that journey, so actually capturing samples of water which we then analysed afterwards, and in those samples we identified microplastics from every single one. Now the reason that's important is because the microfibres are coming, 35% of microfibres in our oceans, microplastics in our oceans, are coming from our clothes. So these Christmas jumpers at the moment, where we're seeing 95% of them are made up of acrylics, which is a type of plastic, that's really worrying.
Okay, all right. Well, fascinating to talk to you. We could talk to you all afternoon. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.